I'd be happy to go over the, you know, the Department of Ed's superintendent review process that we follow.
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you, Member Russo.
Okay, so all school committees are required to perform an annual review of the superintendent, which is our sole employee as a school committee. And the state has, over the last 4 years, has changed 3 times now the evaluation system. The original system when I first joined was a shockingly long and tedious system that, frankly, I can't believe it was ever allowed to go. But anyways, so they revamped it considerably in the second year I was in office, which was 4 years ago, 3 years ago, whatever it was. And then again, last year or the year before, at the end of the year, they made yet another major update. So we have changed our form that we use to match the state. They provide a long list of, well, a less awfully long list of categories that we have to evaluate the superintendent. You know, generally at the highest level, there's really 4 measures. There's the instructional leadership. There's 5 subcategories within that. There's management and operations, and there are 5 categories within that. There's engagement, which used to be called family engagement, and frankly is, I think, mostly still that's what it means. There are 4 categories within that. And then the fourth item is professional culture, which has 6 items. In the last update, this will be the first time we're doing this part of the evaluation. They also added the superintendent performance goals. And while we've had those, I think, for 4 years, they were not included in the actual review until about 1.5 years ago. Unfortunately, the state also doesn't seem to think it's important to tell us when they make updates. So that was a bit of a surprise this year that there was some updates that caused us to have to kind of run around and, well, caused me to have to run around and update all of our forms. So that's the high level, what the evaluation system looks like. There are very long documents that the state provides, as well as our professional association on the evaluation system, recommendations on how to proceed. There's procedural steps as to when things happen and who does them, etc. They're all recommendations. And because school committees vary dramatically in size, as well as, you know, there's regional school committees with a lot of members. There are smaller towns that have, I believe, as small as 3 school committee members, but I only know of those that have 5. So that there's just an enormous amount of variation in what a school committee looks like. So the guidance is rather broad. The other thing that is important to note is that each school committee member provides their own evaluation to a third party, which, you know, sometimes it's the secretary for the school committee. If there's I'm the secretary for the school committee. But in, like, for instance, in Cambridge, the school committee has an actual administrative assistant, I forget their exact title, who's an employee of the school committee in addition to the superintendent and does not work for the superintendent. So in that case, the individual members send their evaluations to their executive assistant. Most school committees appear to choose a member of the school committee to serve in the role of taking in evaluations because individual members do not evaluate the school committee. We actually sit and do it, but that's not the evaluation. The evaluation, just like all other work products that come out of the school committee, are based on a 4-vote majority, or it didn't happen. So we each do our own personal evaluations, and we put them in a pile, and somebody, and in this case, for Medford, it's the secretary of the school committee, compiles them, averages the numbers, takes the language feedback, and actually tries to make it not sound too much like Melanie wrote it or Paul wrote it, or try to make it sound like it's the voice of the school committee, as well as to remove any duplication. Sometimes, you know, all the members will say the exact same statement. Well, nobody wants to see 7 of the same statements written into a review. So, because the review is the review of the school committee, not the individual members. So is there more that I should say? I don't know. I said a lot.
I think that's good. Member McLaughlin?
Yes, thank you. That was really helpful. I don't know if that's what Member Russo was thinking of from the macro perspective. I think that's super helpful for the process perspective. From the macro perspective, what I was thinking about was more specific to the superintendent into the last year that we've all been through. So I just wanted to say it's been 4 years now that the superintendent's been with us. I was actually on the superintendent hiring committee, so I got to meet Dr. Edward Vincent back then during the interviews. So that was interesting to see the process and now being able to work together and collaborate. But I guess I just also want, I guess I just also want to point out that it's been 4 years that Dr. Evie's been with us, and 2.5 of those years have been a global pandemic and a racial reckoning in our country. And so these have been really trying and very difficult times for everyone. And I want to make sure that we really appreciate that from the start, because in addition to that, I want to point out, as I'm sure we know, but I wonder if the community knows, that Dr. Edward Vincent came in 4 years ago to a system that had been primarily a patriarchal system, frankly, and had been run for 30 years for the most part by another administrator. So all of that, I mean, imagine coming into any system as a new person taking over a position that had been filled for 30 years and run a certain way. And again, during a pandemic and a racial reckoning. So I would just like to start that macro view for myself and for the community. And then I would just welcome my colleagues to sort of offer a macro comment if they have any, just sort of big picture idea of like what this past year encompassed and coming back to school from a pandemic, from remote, those sorts of things. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Member McLaughlin. I think just to piggyback on that a bit too, from what we experience as parents, as elected officials, prior to Dr. Edward Vincent coming on, I think was, and I'm going to actually spin to the positive. I think the last 4, especially, the last 2.5 years, the communication and the transparency have just been pretty great. Having a superintendent that emails all parents every week with updates in multiple languages is just really such an amazing thing to have as a parent, and something I just want to acknowledge as a school committee member, because I don't ever remember that happening before. And I think it trickles down. I think that some of our principals have learned and grown from that. And I know, like, specifically, I will, throw some of the administrators, some of my daughter goes to McGlynn, some of Mr. Tucci's updates and messaging on certain things. And Dr. Maurice Edward Vincent is always not only doing the same, but she's very responsive when I'll say, hey, this is great messaging. I wish all the principals would deliver a message like this. What happens like hours later? It just gets done. So I think it speaks to the transparency and the communication, which I believe is great. And I also think, whenever I have emails or questions for the superintendent, very responsive, always willing to give a phone call to, I'm sure, every member, but and I just think that's also a great quality. So just on the higher level, I wanted to piggyback on what you said, Member McLaughlin, to give a brief statement of some great things that are being done. Member Kratz.
Yes, I'll make a macro statement. I want to thank Dr. Edward Vincent for her leadership. She supports all students, teachers, reading her goals and evaluation, that her pre-evaluation. She's been to, school events, community events, many meetings. She's, she provides the weekly bulletin update every week, sharing the news, and, just piggyback on what the mayor said and what Melanie said. She she spends all of her time dedicated to the Medford Public Schools, the needs of the students, the community, the families, and she's responsive to the school committee members and our requests and our needs, and at all hours of the day. And she works tirelessly. And so I just wanted to, share that. And I've, I was on the superintendent search as well, as a school committee member, and we, got to meet Superintendent Dr. Ovidson at that time, and just got to know her very, very well. And it's like we're a close family, everybody, the committee, the administration, the superintendent. And I just want to thank her for her dedication and her leadership.
Thank you, Member Kratz. Do we want to go through the 4 categories: instructional
Member
leadership?
Hayes has her hand up
Oh,
now.
I'm sorry, Member Hayes.
Hi, thanks. I just wanted to say too, given this is my first time going through the evaluation, it was difficult, I have to say, because there are, even though I understand from Member Rousseau that it's been actually streamlined by DESE, there still were 20 indicators that we needed to give an evaluation on, or give some kind of feedback on. And looking back at some of the information from DESE, I think as we move forward, I know Member Graham has kind of started us on the path of updating this process to more closely match what DESE has. According to DESE, we should be choosing like 6 to 8 of focus indicators that we would really be doing our evaluation on, which I think makes a lot more sense in terms of helping us as a school committee, and also helping the superintendent kind of focus on what our main goals are. Even though, of course, she's always and we're always looking at the whole picture. I think as Member McLaughlin said, I think that when the new superintendent came in, I think there was hope for or expectation, and possibly definitely unrealistic expectation of instant change. And we're excited, we're going to make all these changes and kind of update a lot of policies, update a lot of curriculum, just everything. And not only, I think, was it probably the timeline that people were hoping for unrealistic anyway, but then you throw in the pandemic and, the focus shifted, and it had to shift. And we're really still coming out of that. So I wanted to make that point. And also just to make the point that I think anytime you do an evaluation of anyone, unfortunately, I think often you go towards the I don't want to say negative, but you go to where there could be improvement. And it's also, there's a lot of, I went through and made a list for myself of just all the things that have happened just this year, all the things that the superintendent has done. And there's a lot. And so I want to make sure that at least I want to make clear from my point of view, when I talk about areas where I see improvement, that we can make improvement or make growth, I don't see that as deficiencies so much as we're always going to have areas of growth. I mean, hopefully we're always striving for more. So when we start talking about where we see areas that we could improve, it's, a district improvement. It's certainly also because the superintendent represents the district. It's improvements that we see or asking her to implement. But, I just want to, again, like I said, that idea of areas of growth and improvement versus deficiencies. So that's where my head is at in terms of the evaluation and the comments I made, and just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Hayes.
Mayor,
Member Rousseau?
do you want me to get to read the review descriptions and all that stuff right now?
That'd be great. Thank you.
Sure. So being that it's from DESE, they of course have more than one scoring system within a single review, because why not? So in the first top section, which is superintendent performance goals, which is on a scale of 1 to 5, One is did not meet, 2 is some progress, 3 is significant progress, 4 is met, and 5 is exceeded. And there's some wiggle room as to how many performance goals superintendent can have. I think there's a minimum of 3. I think I can't remember the full description. The superintendent had 4. The first one was elementary literacy, which is assessing early literacy skills and implementing interventions in literacy to improve outcomes by deepening teacher and principal knowledge of early literacy skills. This is considered the student learning goal. There's 3 categories. And the 2 focus indicators for this goal were elementary literacy and elementary mathematics. And the score, the average score was 3.69, which is 3.69. That's what it is out of 5. Mayor, I'm not sure if do we want to read all of you've seen how many comments there are. I don't think there's so many that we couldn't read them, but I also don't want to just make the meeting longer than it needs to be. So it's up to you.
I don't know how many comments there are, so
Okay.
I'll take your lead.
Okay. Well, why don't I read them at least for the superintendent performance goals, and then we'll see where we are on time, and move into the
Member McLaughlin.
Thank you. I was just going to ask, maybe if I want to ask my colleagues, I don't know, do you want to read the performance goals first and then we can comment if we want to after the performance goals, or did you want to do that one by one and comment? Or I'm wondering sort of what, again, back to process, what my colleagues are thinking. I'm fine with doing the 4 performance goals and then an opportunity for comments or questions, if that's okay with you, Mayor and colleagues. I don't know, or did people want to stop on each one? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Thank you.
I think we can either ask questions as you have them or stop on after each larger section. Member Rousseau?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think, the opportunity for the school committee to provide their feedback was what we've just completed. So, I mean, we don't have, in my mind, we don't have anywhere near enough time for us to each be providing our feedback on each of the 20 something items here. That was, and I mean, and we received lots of feedback, which was integrated into the document. So we have 1 hour. We're not going to get even into the performance standards if we each speak on our feedback on each of these. I think that's why we're supposed to put it into the form and submit it ahead.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. That's not what I'm asking to the chair. So that's not what I'm asking. I'm just asking if we have questions when you want them or comments when you want them. So if you want to do it after each segment, that's fine, but not on our individual comments. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, after each segment, after each set of 5.
Thank you.
So the first one, which was the elementary literacy, the comments from the committee were as follows: multiple families continue to express concerns regarding interventions in literacy, especially related to dyslexia. They feel disenfranchised by principals and teachers. They also feel there are not enough reading specialists nor enough certified specialists to meet many of their children's needs. Multiple families have shared concerns at the administrative level regarding this matter, but continue to feel concerns have not been adequately addressed. Additionally, we have, under Dr. Edward Vincent's leadership, the district has implemented continuing in-depth professional development in literacy for teachers K-2, assessments, NWEA MAP, and programs at CRE and K-2 to improve and enhance our students' literacy skills and our district's literacy outcomes, all while still dealing with ongoing impacts of the COVID pandemic. This has been a tremendous endeavor for teachers, principals, and administrators. At this time, data regarding the impact of these initiatives on learning outcomes and how teachers are using assessment results to inform their teaching has not yet been presented. I'm wondering if we also, do we want to hear from the superintendent as we go? I don't know how the superintendent feels about that, but I just realized we're doing a lot of talking, or I'm especially doing a lot of talking, and we're not hearing from the superintendent at all, which I'm
Why don't
fine
you just
either way.
keep, yeah, why don't you keep reading and
Okay.
definitely have superintendent can speak anytime she feels necessary or anytime a question is addressed to,
May I make a suggestion?
yes,
Ma'am.
member McLaughlin.
Also, just, again, so we're not hearing the same, and so it also feels more collaborative. Perhaps we could take sections reading
Okay.
sections or take turns reading the comments so that it's not just all coming from one member in terms of the comments. So I just put that out there as well. I'm happy to do some of the reading or if any of the other colleagues want to, but I think that would make it feel a little less monotonous perhaps. So I would just make that recommendation.
Okay, so we'll just, member McLaughlin, maybe you can take the second section for us, and then whoever else wants to volunteer. Member Rousseau.
So I'll finish the performance goals. Okay. Second performance goal is the professional practice goal. And that is to develop skills in strategy development, data analysis, and instructional leadership by completing the 4th extension year of the new superintendent induction program. There were 2 focus indicators. There was one. It's just a wrap, sorry. New superintendent induction program is the focus indicator. And the score for that was 3.96. And the comments on that are glad to see the induction program is complete. More information about data analysis and how this is being used for strategic development and instructional leadership would be welcomed. Dr. Edward Vincent demonstrates substantial commitment to continued professional development and continued improvement in her role as superintendent. I hope to hear more about her learning in the induction program, about how the learning in the induction program has impacted her understanding of her role and actions she has taken in the areas of strategy development, data analysis, and instructional leadership as a result. Would somebody like to take the district-wide focus on instruction and assessment? I can breathe.
I can do it. Developing a district-wide focus on instruction and assessment. So the overall score was a 3.69, and comments were would like to see more on differentiated instruction and universal design for learning to include all learners. We could benefit from the expertise of special educators working with general educators to create a library of sorts of differentiated material and instruction. Don't feel the learning walks are as inclusive of all communities as they could be. Also wondering how the curriculum frameworks are being met in classrooms like access classrooms and out-of-district programs. The superintendent evaluation primarily mentioned professional development as a means of achieving this goal. However, professional development is a short duration activity. We need to see data and accountability on how these professional development topics are actually put into practice. Mention of the monthly coherent practice with principals, but not of how those leaders that incorporated that learning into their schools. If there's data on this, the school committee would welcome it.
I can read the next one if you want.
Thank you, member Grass, sure.
Okay. Maintaining a learning environment built upon the pillars of safety, equity, and consistency. The score was 3.77. There has been some progress and we have much work to do. Equity is perhaps our biggest need to address. Creating a strategic plan or goal around just this issue would be helpful. Defining equity would be a good start.
Members, sorry.
Dr. Edward Vincent?
Yes, I wanted to ask for a little more clarification on the feedback for developing a district-wide focus on instruction and assessment. I was just hoping that the committee could tell me more about that. And like, what would it look like?
Member McLaughlin?
Sure, thank you. I think that in some of this, it would look like general education collaborating with special education and others, so that I know that there's some levels where there's co-teaching happening in some of the classrooms, but not across the district as a whole substantially. And for example, I know Susanna Campbell and Joan Bowen had worked collaboratively with other teachers on differentiated programming and creating a library that's available on our website for some lesson planning that's differentiated. But I'm not sure, or it's unclear what's been done in terms of PD for universal design for learning and how that's actually being incorporated into the classrooms. And then in the learning walk, sort of, looking at the curriculum frameworks and how they're being used across the district and also in out of district. So for example, we know we have certain curriculum at certain levels, so elementary, middle school, high school sort of curriculums. But, is it the same curriculum that, is being used in the special education classrooms? If so, how are they being differentiated? If not, what is the curriculum and how does the superintendent know what the curriculum is and whether we're having high standards for all children, even, children that potentially are taking MCAS alt and don't affect our data scoring. And so I think that could look like, personally, I think that could look like curriculum meetings with special education and looking at as a whole. We also have as a responsibility as a district, I understand, or I've recently understood that we are required to look at curriculum, particularly for our collaborative, and seeing what our collaborative partnerships are in terms of curriculum. That's part of the school committee's responsibility with DESE, from what I understand, but also the superintendent. So I guess I would venture to say, can the superintendent say, clearly what curriculum, if any, is being used in these other classrooms, how curriculum is being differentiated for all learners, again, students with learning differences, but also, students at all different levels, project-based learning, what have you, and what that looks like in a variety of programming. So, from the Access Classroom to the Connections to the EL classrooms to our out of district programs, do we know what the curriculum is and how are we sort of trying to make sure that we have high standards for all? So again, what would that look like? I think it would be, again, learning walks through those environments and also working with your directors in those examples. So your directors of our collaborative, your directors of our special education, your directors of our EL, and looking at how is the curriculum really manifesting across those different strands in terms of really embedding equity in those and having high expectations for everyone. So I hope that was helpful.
Thank you. It was helpful.
Mayor,
Member Graham?
can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I am having some internet challenges today, which is why I'm on multiple devices here. I wanted to comment on the comments about PD and how that fits in terms of, and I think sometimes the question is like, how can we observe that this is happening? And I think PD is a good example. So, we get a laundry list essentially when PD is conducted of, oodles of topics being offered. What we don't ever see is how many people attended each topic. If there were ones that were mandatory, like what was our compliance percentage? And as importantly, like I think we've seen at times information about like what did the smile sheet say, essentially, which is like, what did the learner say immediately after class about whether they liked it or not, which is why it's called a smile sheet. But I think from an outcomes perspective, like what we don't see is based on the PD, what are we expecting to happen and how can we see that actually happening? So, and I think, we hear criticisms from the teachers all the time about meaningful PD and wanting more meaningful PD. And I think one facet of that question is like, what is the application immediately in a month, in 2 months, in 3 months that we're expecting? And then can we measure that? Are we seeing that happen? That to me is information that I think would help the school committee and certainly the community understand, like, we're having these PD days and this is what's happening in them, which is good. That's like a good reporting and accounting of the facts. But then how was that investment realized in practice? So what is it that we're expecting to see? And more importantly, did we see it when we expected to see it? And I think, when you talk about evaluating adult learning programs, those are the kinds of measures you want to be talking about. I'm not a huge fan of going all the way to the level 5 ROI extreme, because I think that's requires a level of machinery that we don't have, and honestly it has limited use. But I think there are is this being integrated into the job kinds of measures, outcomes, expectations, etc., that would help us understand, beyond the fact that we offered 40 things on the professional development day, what did we see in the aftermath of those 40 things?
Thank you, Member Graham.
So,
Dr.
could I-
Edward Vincent?
yeah, I just wanted to ask, Member Graham, so where you were talking about, would you recommend, are you saying that you're recommending that we reduce the number of professional development opportunities? Because we do, the smiley sheets, we do try to get feedback in real time, but also sometimes I think it depends on the content of what they're receiving professional development in. So for example, this year, when we launch the new math program, the teachers will be receiving professional development in how to use this math programming. So over the course of the year, we'll be able to see, their level of comfort. It's going to take time because it's completely new content, but all elementary teachers will be participating in that professional development. So I just was, just as I'm jotting some notes, I'm just trying to find out if you're suggesting that as we do the professional development and have teachers provide feedback on the quality of professional development, the accountability piece of seeing whether or not the professional development is actually taking place, that would have to happen based on, classroom observations and how the students are performing. Are they grasping the content or not? And so I don't know if it's something like that, or so I just was going to ask you for a little more specificity if possible.
Sure. So I'm not in any way suggesting less professional development. Quite the opposite, actually. But what I am suggesting is that, we don't know, if you offered 40 things, right?
Yes.
On a professional development day, is there something that is mandatory? I think usually the answer is yes. And if it's mandatory, what was the compliance rate? How many people participated in the class? And are we making mandatory the things that we truly believe are mandatory? But, and I think then there's the more elective side of the house, right? Which I love, because it gives all our teachers an opportunity to say, this is a thing that I'm dealing with in my specific classroom. And so I'm going to go to that. I love that idea, but which I think makes, because we have such a broad offering, it does make it harder to quantify our outcomes everywhere. But I do think quantifying our outcomes somewhere in the process for some portions of the PD would be really valuable. And I would honestly start with the things that we think of as requirements. Are they effective? And finding out if they're effective could be about classroom observations. It could be about querying staff 30, 60, 90 days out. There's a variety of ways to be able to check in and say, this was in fact a good investment, because the last thing we want is to bring in a facilitator who is going to help with the new math curriculum that basically 30 days out, all the teachers say, you know what, that did not prepare me for what I did in the last 30 days. I think we want to know that, because we wouldn't want to do that again. And I feel like right now that information is sort of anecdotal at best, and certainly not information that comes to the school committee.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you. Member Russo?
You're muted, Paul.
Whatever I was saying. Thank you. Whether or not there's less PD or not is, it's not the size of the pile, it's what's in the pile that matters. We have the same conversation around the testing we do of students, we want to get rid of testing that's duplicative or not serving to do anything other than take up more days of taking away instruction to sit and do testing. For me, it's the same idea. And we did put into our policy last year on annual reports and presentations that we would get an annual report that includes, I think, all the items that Member Graham just said, whether it was mandatory or optional, spending data, like what did it actually cost, and whether it was in-house or external provider, and participation rates. So, I mean, I feel like when we hear that there is, not enough professional development, and then we see the list, it's these two things do not, they just don't make sense together. And what I think is going on is the teachers are saying that the professional development they get isn't what they need or want. And so that I may have just beat this to the death, so I'll stop talking. Sorry.
Mayor, I was gonna say point of order. Can we get back to order? Thank you. Not anything on any members, but I agree if it's 4:42 and we have to get through the rest of them. I'm happy to read the next one if you like, or if someone else wants
Yes,
to.
that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. Standard one. So now we're moving on to the superintendent performance on standards. So there are a number of standards with subcategories. So standard one is instructional leadership. And under that, there's a 1.1 curriculum, 1.2 instruction, 1.3 assessment, evaluation, and data informed decision making. So those items are sort of the subsets of the larger instructional leadership items. So if it's okay, I'll just read standard one with those items, and then maybe another colleague can raise their hand for standard two, and we can hopefully cruise along. So standard one, instructional leadership, the overall score was 3.01. There were 3 paragraphs of comments, basically, again, wondering if this is happening with special education and programming curriculum, out of district placements, whether all students are in a proximal zone of learning, are they getting age appropriate grade level instruction through curriculum throughout of a high standard curriculum throughout our schools. Dr. Edward Vincent's commitment to improving curriculum and instruction at NPS is clear. There's much work to be done. The work happening at the elementary level is evident across literacy, science, and math. Commitment to math excellence at all levels is clear. There remains opportunity at the secondary level to focus on remediation of students in literacy and math in particular, where elementary experience was not the same as today's standards. There's more action needed to bridge gaps because of the pandemic that existed both before the pandemic and certainly were exacerbated through the pandemic. The K-12 health curriculum needs to be a significant focus in the next year. It's not implemented consistently, and pandemic-related gaps are not closed. The elementary curriculum is not up to par, and the current curriculum does not adequately focus on all the aspects of health expected from a modern comprehensive health curriculum. I would also add, if I could just add living here a little bit, maybe we can add it in, is that there's nothing for special education in terms of the health curriculum as well, differentiated health curriculum. A focus on instructional leadership needs to branch out from just the core curriculum areas that are covered by MCAS testing. So again, not just focusing on the MCAS testing curriculum levels, but across all instructional levels. A health curriculum that's taught by appropriately certified professionals that covers all areas of health, inclusive of sexual and reproductive education, needs to be a focus in the coming year. Sexual and gender minorities do not appear to be receiving appropriate health curriculums that is inclusive of their needs. And again, I would add the same for disability and perhaps EL, I'm not sure. This topic has been brought up many times, but continues to not receive attention it deserves for the health, safety, and happiness of our students, not covered by the heteronormative health curriculum. I'll also add DESE just modified their health curriculum frameworks. It was something like from 1999. So it's something that's a state level issue as well, but definitely needs to be looked at. And then under curriculum, the score is 3.07. So the score for instructional leadership as a whole was 3.01, curriculum was 3.07, instruction 2.96, assessment 3.11, evaluation 2.94, and then data informed decision making 2.97 with a comment. This is happening as it's published on the DESE site, et cetera, but growth data, student learning, et cetera, is not something that's shared with school committee or public. The SE and public would appreciate more reporting on our data, even if it's merely included in our meeting packets as informational. So if someone wants to take standard 2.
I can take standard 2.
But I'm sure. Okay, I'll wait for you to go through all of them and then ask the questions at the end.
Can I, Mayor, actually, can I ask if it's okay for Maurice to ask the question
Sure.
after that one? Because I'm afraid I'll forget as if we move on to the next one. So if we could just stay in that, at least the subset with all those categories.
Yep, Dr. Edward Vincent, then we'll have, and then Member Kretz has offered to read management and operations.
Okay, just I wanted to say as I read the feedback under instructional leadership that I, did agree with the feedback that I know that there is work that needs to continue to be done, where it was talking about the secondary level remediation for students in literacy and in math, especially trying to close the gaps from the pandemic. And so I definitely in agreement with the feedback that's being shared. I just wanted to offer that as we think about layering the different programs K-12, one of the things that I'm always trying to balance is like the caseload, the workload on the teachers, because if in fact we end up introducing too many different topics at the same exact time, then you don't have time to really go deep and fully understand. Like when I got here, we adopted the FOSS science, and now we just adopted the math, and we're looking at the literacy as the third program. And so I just wanted to share that I am trying to balance how much is a reasonable amount of new content, new programs to be able to present to the teacher. So that is part of why there isn't this, let's go whole hog and change everything all at once, because it's overwhelming. The teachers need to have time to learn the new programs and then to be able to teach it. But I just wanted to say that I did agree with that feedback, but I just wanted to provide a little context as to why I wasn't trying to go faster at a faster rate, because I truly don't want people to feel stressed or overwhelmed that it's too many programs happening all at the same time, that they're not able to fully process it. And for the data-informed decision-making, my hope is now that we have NWEA and where you were talking about growth data, yes, this was the first year. And so we never had a data system in place. So my hope is to continue to show the growth, which is what I had presented a few weeks back, that we want to see where students are starting, whatever their starting point is, whether they're a student with disabilities, whether they're an English learner, where they start and where they end the school year, are they showing growth? And so as a district, we were showing growth, that we were hitting at least 50% at almost every single grade level. We were above the 50th percentile. So I'm hoping next year, as we have our second year of using an additional assessment system, because the MCAS, again, you have to wait a year to get that's going to help. So those are just my only two comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll start on standard 2, management and operations. The score was 3.15. There is feedback under several of the sections under standard 2. So I'll read the feedback for standard 2, and then I'll continue on with the score for each other subset and read the comments for that. So standard 2, management operations 3.15. The changes to the budget this year were effective and efficient. The committee was able to get a comprehensive view of the priorities and discuss in a positive and productive manner. The state of the district system is poor. By systems, I'm referring to processes, technology, and people that comprise the foundation and infrastructure on which the district runs. There needs to be people, there needs to be, I'm sorry, I'm just missing my spot. There needs to be considerable focus moving forward and prioritize a well-run set of administrative functions without improvements on the administrative side of the house. The district's continued improvement in curriculum and instruction will be limited. Compliance with school committee policy is low, and in the case of out of school suspension policy inadequate, the committee proactively provided an extensive amount of planning time, asked the administration to come back to us with any changes that they felt would be needed to operationalize the policy and to articulate what financial supports are needed. None of this occurred. Students appear to be regularly suspended this year, which is complete conflict with the policy set forward by the committee. As another example, the committee also adopted policy that outlines regular reports, and when throughout the school year we expect to receive them, there has been no acknowledgement of or accounting for those reports this academic year. 2.1, environment, the score was 2.97. We are beginning to evaluate operational systems in a district that has long been without. The next one was 2.2, human resources management and development. Score was 3.24. A standard report of other school committees receives is the personnel report containing hires, termination, leaves of absence, workers' compensation, and other positions. This report is invaluable for understanding the state of the organization. This report is received monthly or more often in other districts. While it is understood that due to disconnected software systems, this report cannot be generated without substantial work effort, and thus we have not pressed for this report. There does not seem to be a plan to replace this disconnect software system so that the administration can begin providing this critical report. This report is more than nice to have. It is considered mandatory, and members of other school committees are shocked we don't get this report. Identifying a path forward to replace the software systems or connect them or merely to fund some kind of a project to make these reports easily generated is something we would like to see. So this is critical report can be generated and supplied to the committee is something we hope we can start in the coming year or two. Then we have 2.3, scheduling and management information systems. The score was 2.84. There are still multiple calendars throughout the Medford Public School system. These multiple calendaring systems, which do not speak to each other, result in predictable failures such as double booking of spaces. This issue has risen to the forefront numerous times. The committee has made clear our desire for a single calendaring system, or at least some of the operationalized method to ensure the problems of the multiple sources of truth is resolved, and to improve transparency about who is using our space and for non-MPS affiliated groups, what they are paying for the space. And law ethics, 2.4, law ethics and policies. The score was 3.11. 2.5, fiscal systems. The score was 3.56. And the overall score was 3.15 for standard 2, management and operations.
Thank you, Member Kretz. We have standard 3, engagement. A little small on my computer, but I guess I could try. 2.66, family and community engagement needs improvement across MPS. While we made gains early in the pandemic, those efforts of collecting feedback, hosting Q&As and roundtables, and providing substantive updates have not continued. In general, our public relations efforts are low. For example, the website redesign is being undertaken with no stakeholder involvement, which is likely to mean that it will miss the mark of expectations for students and families. Going forward, I'd like to see Superintendent focus on creating a district-wide culture of communication and engagement at every level of the organization. Engagement 2.54, we have a lot of work to do.
Mayor?
Yes, Member Rousseau?
Sorry, the updated version that I sent later in the day had more comments, and I see that you don't have them right there. Want me to just read the rest of the comments for that item?
Sure.
because I know you don't have them in front of you. Dr. Ed Robinson is actively engaged in both the school community and the wider Medford community. She attends many school sports and cultural events, as well as many city-sponsored events, often during after-school hours and on weekends. This involvement in student and community activities is valuable in helping families and students and their families feel supported and welcomed by MPS and MPS administration. This year saw the hiring of re-engagement specialists, a position newly created in June 2021. Patient engagement. These initiatives are designed to foster improved relationships between MPS and the students and families who have been less engaged with the schools, increased opportunities for two-way communication with students and families as needed, communication that is focused on district learning initiatives, as well as community building. Students and families need more consistent opportunities to provide feedback, ideas, and concerns, both in person and through surveys. I also hope to see the superintendent's Friday update email, which has been a consistent and important method of communication with the community, evolve both in format and content. I did send all the members during this meeting the update, which I realized I only had sent to Susie, so my apologies.
Yep, I have the updated version up now.
Thank you.
We can continue.
3.1.
3.1 engagement. We have a lot of work to do in effective family and community engagement. The district has an FCE audit done through a state-run process in 2020, 2021. The outcome of the audit was that there was not a commitment to the time it takes to build FCE throughout the district. When offered the opportunity to continue with the outside FCE consultant at no cost, the district somewhat ironically declined due to lack of time and resources. Sharing responsibility, 2.56, communication, 2.79. Good to see the weekly communication, but this is a one-way communication, need two-way communication, culturally proficient that goes beyond a curriculum night or weekly newsletter. Family concerns, 2.76. We have work to do in responding effectively, equitably, and efficiently to families and community. As the audit indicated, we do not appear to have any provide feedback care system in place. This results in email being the sole method, which is both highly time consuming, but also a method that allows for any analysis of what is received. Surveys repeated over time can yield valuable information about trends and highlight changes in how well we are doing and in the needs of families over time. Does somebody want to take over standard 4 professional culture?
I was wondering if we can comment on, if I can raise my hand.
McLaughlin?
Thank you. I just wanted to comment, and I'm happy to read the professional culture next, but I just wanted to sort of comment on the family engagement piece because I think it's an important one that sort of was one of the lower scores, needs improvement sort of score. It was in between a little bit more than a 2 point. It was a 2.66, so not quite there yet with a 3. And I just think that that's something that, you know, while we have a new department and, you know, that department's growing, and frankly, you know, from Member Hayes's perspective at the beginning of the meeting as well, there's just been so much that has been done compared to the previous administration around this, just like thinking about materials being translated that hadn't before, and a family and community engagement, liaison that we didn't have before, just so many things that have been done. So I do want to say that as well, but I do think that this is a huge area for improvement and there's lots of opportunity here. And we have so much expertise in the community, both through families and community organizations, that where we could really build community-based schools and be able to leverage a lot of the resources that are there. So I just sort of wanted to expand on that a little bit. And also just in terms of communication with other more marginalized communities. For example, I know that Talking Tools is a software program that I believe that Director Paul Teixeira uses. and that the district has access to that. And it was something that I was speaking with him about, even in terms of having the superintendent and school committee members have access to that, talking points, so that we could actually talk to people who are not English speakers in their native language, that we could text with them and then it could be translated, and vice versa. And so I know that they've been using the Talking Points app, and it's been super successful with the EL teachers. And I would say, why could that not be expanded to, again, the superintendent and potentially school committee members, so that we're thinking about how we're engaging our more marginalized communities? Because it does seem all too often the emails are from the same people are at the table, the same people come to the meetings. And I would really like to see that disrupted. I'd really like to be able to work collaboratively in figuring out how we can really engage families. So that was just the feedback I wanted to offer. And I was wondering if Dr. Edward Vincent has anything to say on that. Thank you.
Mayor? Okay.
Dr. Edward Vincent.
Thank you. As I was looking at the feedback, I think I was surprised and a little taken aback at the engagement rating. And so I guess one of the things that I am, when I have the opportunity to be with families and I talk with them, many times families have said to me how appreciative they are of the weekly communication and realizing, feeling like they are aware of what's happening within the district globally. And in our weekly communications that go out to the entire school community, when appropriate, we do include whether it's CPAC announcements or other types of things that are happening on the community or city side. We do try to include those events to broaden the stakeholders who may be looking at it. So I guess I was just going to ask for, I looked at the feedback, but and I know where on bullet 3.3 about one-way communication, we do translate all of the communication that we send out. We have invested in talking points as a district. So I do know there are opportunities for teachers to communicate as well with some of our families that are ELs, where English is not their first language. So I do feel like we have tried to be consistent at least, and having one format or a way of communicating with families. And so I don't know, who specifically, but if other members wanted to just speak to some of the pieces under engagement. And as a district, we made significant investment in our engagement specialists, which again are another layer that didn't exist before, but we added that whole department to really try to meet the needs of some of our most vulnerable students that may in other situations be falling through the cracks. So I just was hoping to get a little more feedback or clarification on that overall rating. Thank you.
Mayor.
Member Rousseau?
Thank you. So, this review is the superintendent review, but it's a review of the school system because we don't get to review principals and assistant superintendents. So, I think that your personal communications that are going on Friday are in fact excellent. And, I remember early on in the pandemic, I think when I provided some feedback on the formatting and you took it and you improved it. And that I think is not, in my mind, this is not what this relatively low score is about. It's that, you're one person. And frankly, I think your communication that's going out on Fridays is great. Could it be better? Everything could be better. But you are not all of the other people that should be communicating out. And that's where I feel like I see weaknesses in consistency, which is a huge, is one of your principal, I forget the word I'm looking for, but consistency is critical and important. And at this point in time, it seems like to the large extent, principals and other people who are communicating out to families are on their own. And I recognize that there's not a public relations or marketing office to draft templates for everybody to use and find out what all the various communications that go out in a year are and make sure that they're consistent and using the right language and translated ahead of time, frankly. I mean, a lot of the communications the district sends out are not unique. Like every year, they're the same communications with tweaking dates and places and names. And yet, is there a giant folder in somebody's computer or office that everybody's pulling from? My sense is the answer is no. And so for me, that's why this score is, obviously this is not just my score, it's everybody's scores averaged together, but having a consistency all the way from the top to the bottom creates cohesiveness. It ensures that we are all using the right language. And that's for me why I think that this area has an enormous area for improvement.
Member Graham?
Thank you. I think the other, a couple of, I'll say, sort of small examples of what we're talking about here come to mind.
Member Graham, I can't hear her anymore.
I believe Member
Looks like
Graham
she's frozen.
froze.
Do you guys want me to read the next one, and when Member Graham comes back on, she can comment or not, Mayor?
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Oh, now we can.
Can you all hear me now?
Just now.
Okay. Sorry about that. I do not know what's happening with my internet today, but it's like flaking in and out on different devices at different times. So that's why you see me keep popping in and out of the meeting. So I can give you a couple of examples. So on the same day, I got several things home from Lucas's class. And one of them was a permission slip about the Procter & Gamble video that we use as our health curriculum for fifth graders. And it said, you need to return this to us. And there were options to opt in or opt out. I explicitly had a conversation about aligning our strategies and processes there to what Desi says, which is we can and frankly should provide opt-out language for parents who want to opt out. But I was left with a question of, what if I don't send this back? Did all of those kids also miss the tiny little sliver of health curriculum that we've got for them? The second piece of paper was a permission slip for Junior Olympics, I believe. It had the wrong dates. It asked for volunteers, although most of the, we never actually got any communication about what that meant. And then I forget what the third piece of paper was on the same day, but there was like another similar communication issue. And I just look across like all of those things, and they're all very small, but the small stuff really matters. And I want to point out that we do have a public information officer. I would like to see us think about the culture of communication in the district in total, and really think about how do we improve, much along the lines of what Member Rousseau said, how do we improve not just how the superintendent communicates, because that is unequivocally better than under our past superintendent, but all the ways that we communicate from like small to tall there's wild inconsistency. And, you know, the barrage of forms that come home at the beginning of the year that ask for the same information in triplicate. The fact that, you know, a week before school starts, there will be a litany of repeatable questions about buses that will appear on social media. Those are all indicators that we have work to do.
Thank you. So we have professional culture.
Okay, sorry, hold on one second. Make sure I'm having, professional culture. I want to make sure I'm on the right.
Before we go to
page.
professional culture, these were merged, so they're not specific comments for every.
No,
These were merged, correct?
Yes.
Because I did put some positive things in there, and I just don't see
Okay,
much
let me
positive.
go look, let me go look at your review. I'm sorry if I missed them. I did miss
No, that's
Member
okay.
Hayes earlier.
I just feel like we should be pointing out the good things too, you know,
agreed. Do you want me to read standard form there?
please.
Culture. Standard for professional culture. This was 2.88 overall, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 subcategories. But interestingly, 1, 2, 3, 4 of the 6 subcategories don't have any comments. So I actually have some questions on them because I wasn't sure from colleagues. So, but professional culture 2.88, the superintendent should focus on relationships building in order to further her objectives around curriculum and instruction. I'd like to see her build strong relationship with teachers and staff and begin to reverse decades of mistrust and non-collaboration that have been present in MPS. Concerned about the climate and culture of school and high school and would like to see action to address the structural ways our organization hinders progress on achieving a positive climate and culture. The organizational structure is not optimal and needs to be significantly overhauled in order to see alignment with student achievement goals that will close gaps and serve children. School committee is available to collaborate, support, and provide resources. This work is difficult. Would like to see more effective collaboration with the school committee and other stakeholders to move the strategic vision forward. There's been examples of cultural proficiency issues at various places in the district this year. For example, a dress code at the high school that indicate there's more work to do to create the kind of environment that we all wish to see for our children. Through her own continued professional development and the many professional development opportunities she's implemented for administrators, teachers, and other staff, Dr. Edward Vincent demonstrates a strong commitment to continuous learning and high standards. In the area of communication, Dr. Edward Vincent has continued some valuable systems of communication with families, Friday emails and staff, learning walks, and listening tours. While these are a good foundation, there's not enough evidence that they are being consistently and fully utilized as a means to inform and involve these groups in order to advance the work of the district. Commitment to high standards, 3.37. High standards are only high standards if they're consistently applied. Work to be done to ensure high standards are universally applied throughout the district. The standards the places where our standards need improvement are mostly known, and therefore it's the willingness to act on those challenges across the district that appear to be the difficulty. For cultural proficiency, 2.87, communications, 2.69, continuous learning, 2.87, shared vision, 2.84, managing conflict, 2.64. Perhaps it's the pandemic and the ongoing disagreement and dissent, but the superintendent could be more direct and a stronger leader when it comes to this standard, managing conflict. And then Mayor, if I can ask a question on the professional culture, or sort of if I could raise my hand.
Yes.
Thank you. So for professional culture, sort of as an overall standard, the way I just sort of want to explain the way that I saw the standard for professional culture was more about again, because we're evaluating the superintendent and not the whole district, it was more about how the district and teachers and staff and others are all interacted in communicating with each other. And I do think that we have some cultural, some professional culture concerns around what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of I guess there's sort of a negative environment right now. And I don't know if that's an artifact of sort of whatever this post-pandemic phase is or post-pandemic phases or what have you, but we definitely have, a low mood at the schools, if you will. And so that's one of the things that I saw this particularly as. And I just want to be really clear around the cultural proficiency piece, which is under the professional culture, which was a 2.87. I just want to just make a point here for me that is not, in my opinion, what some might view as cultural proficiency as a whole in that professional culture. So in other words, I think Dr. Edward-Vincent has done a tremendous job bringing diversity to our district in terms of reminding us all why diversity is so important in our district, why equity and inclusion is so important in our district. And that cannot be easy for a woman superintendent who also happens to be a person of color coming into a district that's been very traditional to have to do. So lifting that weight all this time, I'm sure has got to be really difficult. And I just want to say that from the Haitian Flag Day to the weekly, the school committee updates when the superintendent is very inclusive of different events, not only in the community, but nationally, the need for hiring diverse staff, all of those things, I think have been exceptional. So I just wanted to sort of make a point here that I feel like there was some, again, and this is an artifact of DESE, I think there's some embedded names in here that I'm not sure necessarily go with culture and proficiency under professional culture. And again, I think that might be an artifact of a privileged system, frankly. So I just wanted to put that piece out there that I think Dr. Edward-Vincent has done a lot, and it can't be easy in that realm. And I just want to let her know how much I appreciate her for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Member McLaughlin. If I could, from the chair, my comments, I guess, didn't go through, or so I just want to point out disagreement and dissent where, I'm talking about managing conflict. I gave the example in my review on something that I thought brought, a lot of disruption and conflict to the city, but how the superintendent and her team handled it with such grace and did a fabulous job. And, it is a touchy subject. We didn't renew the contract, and people were very upset. They had questions, they had concerns, yet it was a matter that really couldn't be discussed. So what the superintendent did was to make sure she brought in families at a meeting, and she, along with her team, brought in families to really listen, to get their concerns and ideas and questions out on the table. And then at the same evening or the night after, brought in faculty and staff to really talk through it and to work together, I know a good hiring team together to make sure everybody had a seat at the table. And I just think the plan that was put in place and how it was executed was pretty amazing. And I just want to point that out, because that's how, we got through such a tough situation, and it could have been a lot more on our backs and our shoulders, but it was handled the best way it could, in my opinion. And I just think that should be added to the comments. That's where when I saw managing conflict, that's the first thing that came to my mind, because I feel like 2.64 is just extremely low. There is conflict in our community. There's conflict in the United States, conflict in the world, but that's not the superintendent's, complete responsibility to solve. I think when you talk about managing conflict within the school atmosphere, that was something that probably was the biggest thing I can remember in the last 2 years, other than, dealing with the pandemic. And I just feel like tempers were calmed down and everybody had a seat at the table and was heard and involved, however much or little they wanted to be. And I just want to commend the superintendent for that. Member Rousseau?
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to amend 4.6 conflict management, the feedback, to include the feedback that the mayor just provided, and ask that the mayor just send me the language that she just said or previously says she had in her review. It did not come across to me. I did go and look, but I don't doubt that she wrote it. So
And may I ask member, through the chair that, any other, obviously, I think it's, obvious, but just wanted to be sure that any other comment, is included. And thank you for putting this all together, through the chair, member Russo. I did it last year and it's, it's time consuming and tedious. And, so thanks for putting it together. But if any other comments, could be added, and then if it's okay to just rename the evaluation as updated or, final or something like that. So when we're deleting the other ones, we're not getting confused about what we have and what we don't. That would be super helpful. So I second
Mayor?
that.
Yes, motion approval. Go ahead, member Russo.
I'm not sure that, I don't have other feedback to include, so I'm not sure what's being suggested be added.
Motion by member Russo, seconded by member McLaughlin, that I will send you the language either tonight when I get home at 8:30 or tomorrow morning, and that will be, this document will be amended.
I'm sorry, I thought that, Mayor, may I?
Yes.
I thought there were other comments or from earlier too that had not been or had been overlooked. So if there wasn't, I apologize. But if there is, I would just ask that obviously that they can be included. Thank you.
Yes, I think I had one on communication and engagement. So I can try to find my document if I saved it. If not, I will put some thoughts together and send those to member Russo by midday tomorrow. So there's the motion on the floor to amend because for some reason my comments were left out. Roll call, please.
Member Graham,
Yes.
member Hayes,
Yes.
member Kratz,
Yes.
member McLaughlin,
Yes.
member Musto,
Yes.
member Russo, yes, Mayor Longacre.
Yes, 7 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative. Motion is approved. Is there a motion to finalize this so we can move on
Mayor, the
to?
superintendent has her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Edward Vincent.
Yes, Mayor, I just wanted to, and I welcome the feedback. I wanted to talk a little bit about the cultural proficiency rating. And I guess I would love to hear a little more, but when I went back to look at what's in the standard, ensures that policies and practices enable staff and students to interact effectively in a culturally diverse environment in which students' backgrounds, identities, strengths, and challenges are respected, as evidenced by the sufficient provision of guidance, supports, and resources to all schools to promote culturally responsive learning environments and school cultures that affirm individual differences of both students and staff. And I do feel that that is something that is happening in Medford. If you go to the schools, I was at the, Missatuck and the Roberts today, and I do feel when I'm in the schools, any of them, that the students are valued, whether it's showing flags from the diverse representation, but the students and families, whether it's their background, their identity, their strengths, their challenges, that Medford really does a very good job trying to welcome all. And so I just was, again, because I don't know what went into the, that rating, but I just was wondering, in addition to all of the DEI work that we're trying to do with professional development, I was just hoping to get a little more feedback just to help me understand what I need to do more of. Thank you.
Maybe we can all think through that and provide some feedback through phone calls to Dr. Edward Vincent or email if nobody has any comments right this minute. Member Russo?
It's hard to talk about this particular one. But what the superintendent said, I don't think is incorrect. I think it's, however, the adult view of the situation. That's how I'll put it. I don't think it's the student view of the situation. I don't have any, I can't be more specific than that, other than to say that, you know, that it just, this just feels like this is an adult assessment. The number is not an adult, is not an assessment of how the adults in the building perhaps feel that the place is. But students and certainly some staff, I think, do not feel that we are particularly culturally proficient. We are incredibly diverse, which gives us a great opportunity to become culturally proficient. You know, if it was like you know, someplace in New Hampshire where everybody's white and everybody's, you know, Christian or Protestant or whatever, everybody's this, you know, effectively the same and to a large extent, it's harder, I think, to become culturally proficient. There's just no opportunities to exercise that muscle. But Medford has, frankly, has the opportunity that many communities could dream of to really become culturally proficient. I don't think we're there, and I don't so much feel like it's a reflection of the superintendent, because I think we've heard very clearly that the superintendent is, you know, is a rock star in this arena. But the superintendent is not all of the employees. But the superintendent, we evaluate the superintendent and really we evaluate the school system in this process. So I certainly would agree. It's not a reflection on the superintendent, on her specific cultural proficiencies, but making that come down and be part of all of the schools and all of the staff, and not just be I mean, I'm just saying, don't be a 2-hour PD. I have no idea how that even works out, but I'm just, that's my feedback, because I know you wanted feedback, and it's a hard one for me to really kind of come up with on the spot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member McLaughlin.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, yeah, the school system as a whole, the community as a whole, that's one thing, the superintendent individually. And I felt like, particularly for an evaluation of the superintendent, that, you know, this number was a little bit off. So I appreciate Member Rousseau sort of looking, you know, mentioning the district as a whole and some things that need to be worked on. But I think that that's a community effort and a collaborative effort, both from the school committee, from our families, from our teachers, from our staff, for everybody. It's not one person that can direct any of that work. This is very difficult discussion and conversation. That's why they call them courageous conversations. But I think that this is work that we all have to do. And so I appreciate that the superintendent is leading the way in this. And I hope that we can support her and that our schools and our community will support the work as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Member McLaughlin. Member Mastone.
Hi, thank you. I think we're probably wrapping it up since it's 5:28, but 2 points, which I wasn't sure if other people were going to touch upon them before. I didn't want to repeat my colleague's sentiment. For communication, I know teachers have spoke to me about just more communication directly with the teachers. We do all appreciate the newsletter for the families, but maybe there could be a separate newsletter. It doesn't have to be weekly, maybe monthly, just for the teachers to know what's happened academically. So the schedule wise for the different grade levels, or maybe some points of information that are coming down from DESE. So teachers across the board know where you're coming with your vision or your goals. I think that would be helpful, so they all know why things are getting implemented, because this is what you're hoping to do to Medford Public Schools to make them better for every child, which I know without a doubt that you are thinking of every child every day. And the second part is, now that COVID is subsiding, and that we can, I know you love to do the data stuff, and that we have science that is rolled out. We have math that is mid-rolled out, and now it's time to look at the English for or ELA for all grades, and for social studies / history / civics. But I think now that we have more time because you have less responsibility with COVID decisions, which you had to make those on a daily basis, that I think parents, those are my two things that parents have said to me recently, is now talk about English, social studies, and teachers more communication directly with the teachers. And that's, I think, other than that, I know you are on the clock 24 hours a day, every day of the year. And I think most of the community understands that and appreciates that. So I just look forward to now, you know, I guess going back to when you were hired and your goals then, now, you know, you were slowed down with COVID, but now you can kick it back into gear, and it's exciting to see where Medford Public Schools are going to go. So thank you, Dr. Maurice.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. I just wanted to say that with the teacher communications, one of the things that is currently happening is between both Ms. Galusi and Dr. Cushing, they were sending direct communications to teachers, talking about grade level teams and scheduling and meetings. So I can work on trying to revamp that, but there is a communication mechanism in place for teachers directly. It was just being managed by the both of them to the respective teams. So I just wanted to comment that there is communication, but we can work on letting them know that I agree with what's being sent out. But thank you for all the feedback.
We're all on the same team. Thank you.
Motion
Motion on the floor?
motion to approve.
Motion to approve as amended. Member Rousseau?
Member Stone said something that also reminded me that, you know, when we're doing this review, the hardest part for us is that we are not walking the halls and sitting in every classroom in the district. And a lot of these questions, frankly, are things, especially the old version of the evaluation. It was as if we were everywhere all the time and could know everything. It was bizarre. This one's better, but it still has a lot of that we are expected to just mind meld with the entire staff of the district and all families. What something Member Mustone said, though, that Dr. Edward Vincent said about, you know, the communications that might be coming from principals and Assistant Superintendent Galusi, and I'm just like, blind CCing us on things that, you know, aren't for us. We're not the target audience, but blind CCing us throughout the year on things that you're like, you know, this was in the evaluation, and let's blind CC the school committee so they see that it's happening. Because when we come back a year from now, a lot of us will look at the last review, our last comments, and we will be like, oh, I don't feel like I know anything more about this than I did last year. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. And the time to try and convince us that this stuff happened is not when we sit down to do our review. So that's just a suggestion I had, and I see Member Hayes' hands.
Thank you.
Member Hayes?
Thanks. I wanted to add to that in terms of, I think that's part of what we can improve on with the evaluation process also. I looked at some other cities and towns just to see how it's done in other places. And I think they also said this in my orientation, that part of the process when we create the goals is to really talk about what evidence we would need to see to be able to evaluate you clearly and accurately and fully. So I think that as we move forward and start to really try to update this process and make it mirror more, I think, what DESE intends, that's a piece that we really should be doing, is really being clear about what evidence we want to see so that you know what to expect from us. Because, you know, if it's open-ended and you don't know, you may feel like you're providing us and what we need, and we're looking at it and going, but I don't know if that quite meets what I was thinking. So I think if we can all be on the same page about what evidence would give us, you know, would help us to be able to evaluate you, I think that will go a long way to making this process easier also, and fairer.
Thank you.
Second to approve.
Mayor,
I think the mayor,
she said she had to leave at 5:30. I wonder, but she's still on. So maybe, is the vice chair available? Ooh,
I
what is-
am.
Oh,
So we have a motion to approve the superintendent's evaluation as amended by member Rousseau, seconded by member McLaughlin. Is that right?
Vice versa.
Yes, sorry.
So let's call the roll.
Member Graham,
Yes.
member Hayes,
Yes.
member Kretz,
Yes.
member McLaughlin,
Yes.
member Musto,
Yes.
member Rousseau, yes, Mayor Longo Kern.
Yes. 7 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, motion passes. We have, I think it's labeled, I'm sorry, I had to switch to my phone because I only have till 5:30. Number 3 was listed as motion to calendar, which we already approved.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Wait,
Oh, sorry.
Can we back up? We have the school committee dates, which we need to vote on today. We should not be taking a vote on the calendar because it was already approved.
Correct.
So are we making, is the motion to approve the school committee dates?
To 2023.
Member Rousseau, through the chair, it was member Rousseau who motioned and I seconded.
Roll call, please.
I think, excuse me, point of information, I think member Graham was asking for clarification that the motion was to approve the school committee calendar.
The school committee meeting calendar.
Yes.
Correct.
Member Graham?
Yes, the motion is to approve the school committee meeting calendar, which is the dates that we will hold regular school committee meetings in the 2022-2023 school year.
Roll call?
Yep.
Thank you. Member Graham,
Yes.
member Hayes,
Yes.
member Kretz,
Yes.
member McLaughlin,
Yes.
member Musto,
Yes.
member Rousseau, yes, Mayor Longo Kern.
Yes. 7 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, motion passes.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to
Second.
adjourn by member Rousseau, seconded by member McLaughlin. Roll call, please.
Member Graham,
Yes.
member Hayes,
Yes.
member Kretz,
Yes.
member McLaughlin,
Yes.
member Musto,
Yes.
member Rousseau, yes, Mayor Longo Kern.
For the negative, meeting is adjourned. Have a great night, everybody.